So for today, we have a special guest, Norm Ashkenas. He's the CCO, Chief Compliance Officer at Robinhood. And what we're going to talk about today is his journey from being a compliance person in investment banking and broker dealer, going into like the crypto space, going into Robinhood, and kind of a really different change. So what I'd love to find out, Norm, is like you spent most of your career in like traditional brokerage firms. And now you're with Robinhood with, I imagine, a lot of young people, you know, very tech, fintech, cryptocurrencies, all that stuff. What made you make this switch and how do you like it?
Well, I'll answer the second question first, which is I'm still having fun after
Mhm.
over 4 years. It's been 4 years that at times has felt like 20, to be honest with you, because it's been so much going on in the markets, in the world, and at our company. But in terms of making the switch, really, I'd call us more of a tech company than a fintech in many ways. We're just
Mhm.
in financial services. And when I started talking to the folks at Robinhood some years ago, back in 2020, I felt like I could help. I felt like I could contribute building on my long experience in compliance and legal roles, traditional, as you said, Jack, and bring that into a tech company that was expanding and growing and trying to scale really quickly as the pandemic, brought many more investors in the market, and as Robinhood did. And it felt like an opportunity for me to, in many ways, tell stories and teach differently than I had in the past, because compliance is teaching and sales and
Mhm.
storytelling. And doing that with an audience that had built a technology company that had exploded in financial services really felt like a great challenge for that stage in my career. And it's challenge is really what it's been, but it's been a lot of fun. It's the best way to describe it, Jack.
Was there kind of a moment where you said, "Hey, I've been doing, this traditional brokerage stuff for years and years, and I just need a change," or did somebody tap you and say, "Hey, are you interested in coming aboard?" How did that happen?
I was plugging along happily at Fidelity, leading a couple divisions. I had just moved roles there from retail to institutional and intermediate. Um, I wasn't looking, but somebody did reach out to talk to me about this opportunity. And
Mhm.
as I started talking to people and thinking about it, every firm out there, Fidelity, Schwab, Merrill, Morgan Stanley, everyone was talking about this Robinhood firm and figuring out how to replicate or do differently what Robinhood was doing, which at the time was engaging and delighting and attracting young customers, 18 to 30-ish years old at the time. And everyone wanted those customers because that was the next generation of investors. And as I was thinking about this opportunity to join Robinhood, I realized why wouldn't I go where everybody's talking about and take that opportunity to make that experience even better for the customers by giving them, all the bells and whistles and trappings you'd expect of a top-notch, regulatorily compliant offering, along with delightful and engaging and the like. And that would really take this group of investors and help them be the next generation that will learn and grow and have futures based upon being in the markets.
I got to give you a lot of credit because it's bold to do that. I mean, you're the way you're sharing it. It's like, oh yeah, I just, kind of seamlessly moved into it. But it got to be not just you, but just generally when, someone does something for so long and then you pivot to something new, it's a scary thing. Because you don't know. It could end up being horrible. It could be great. It could be whatever. And think about it, so many people just stick to where they are because they're afraid. And I give you credit because crushed over to something completely different. And for the audience here, I think that's one of the things that people should know about is that like, okay, sometimes you have to take these risks. You have to take these, you have to see the opportunity and then seize it, right? Because like you saw this opportunity, hey, you saw this change and like, I'm going to jump on this and see what I can make happen, right?
And I think that's fair, Jack. And maybe, in me describing it in about
Yeah.
90 seconds, it sounded like it was not a hard decision. Obviously, it's a very
Yeah.
challenging decision to make that change. And some of it is, as people are thinking about opportunities like this, I was interviewing the people at Robinhood as much as they were interviewing
Mhm.
me, because you've got to get a sense, is this a place that you're going to be
Yeah.
comfortable? Is this a place for me? Is this a place that I think I can affect change I think needs to be changed? Will I have support and backing of management? Is this a company that matches what I'm trying to do with my career, with my life, with generally how I approach things? And that was a critical part of it. And anybody interviewing for jobs should have that. And clearly, I took the role. I clearly had the sense. I mean, Vlad and Beju were very serious founders, and Gretchen Howard, who'd helped bring me in, and Dan Gallagher and Jason Warnick, other executives. They were serious people trying to build something serious. And that's part of it. Want to look at is like,
Mm.
who's there, who joined there, who came in to help on the journey. And if it's people that you know and respect, or are aware, if you don't know them, if they've been really had strong careers themselves, you say, this is where I want to be. And in worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, you can go somewhere else.
Mhm.
Just a thought.
No, that's a good attitude, and it seems like it was helpful that you had some other senior people joining up, so you could feel like, all right, I have some other, company here that I could, I trust them, so I can feel comfortable here. When you kind of go and move here, is it? Don't laugh at me and make fun of me, but like, is it weird? Because I vision lots of young people there, and is it like a different vibe than traditional brokerage firms? Because may either are they younger or not, or they're just all ages, or how is it?
Um, say skews younger for the most part.
Yeah.
It's a newer company, and you've got folks coming from places like Meta, or X, or wherever, or Amazon and other places. You've got technology bases, and we've got young, hungry, talented people, some coming right out of school, some it's second or third jobs, some have already been part of startups. And then you've got a mix of others who have come from traditional financial services, like myself, like our chief legal officer, general counsel,
Mhm.
head of brokerage. There's a variety of folks with a lot of experience. What I'd say is, this company has brought in, over the last number of years, we brought in some more, I'll use the word older, I guess, and more experienced
Mhm.
folks like myself, to match what we had before, in the same way that some of the companies you mentioned earlier have actually brought in a lot more younger folks to
Mhm.
try to infuse new ideas and new talent. And again, I love working with people who are at a far different stage in career than I am, because they challenge me. They ask questions that I wouldn't ask anymore. There are assumptions you make because you've been doing something for 25 or 30 years, and you haven't revisited why you do that. You just know that's why you do it, or that's what the rule is.
Mhm.
And you get challenged to say, huh, maybe I have to look at this again. And sometimes the answer isn't changing. Sometimes you say, maybe there's another way to think about this. And that is something that having people that are a little younger can help. And it's not just about age, some of it's about not coming from a traditional background. Granted, it's a different approach, where you're working sometimes with people who don't have the base of knowledge that you have. The same way it's probably frustrating for them, where they don't they're used to working with somebody who has coded in Python, knows HTML5, and knows that, and you don't, and that's frustrating for them. So it's kind of bridging those gaps is another thing that's interesting to do.
Yeah, because I was thinking about when you mentioned, people coming from Meta, from X, or what have you. So it's so different, their mindset. So does that present a challenge for you where they may not really understand the nuts and bolts of compliance and legal and risk and audit? Do you end up, but are you able to kind of bridge those gaps, or do you have just healthy conversations to just educate them? All right, hey, maybe you're at Meta, but this is a different world and this is what you have to do now. Is
Yeah,
that
I
as
mean, it's conversations, yes,
Yeah.
and it is education, it's conversations, and it's having a give and take about it, because it's just Financial services is one of the most highly regulated industries out there. I think if you looked at the landscape, defense, biotech, pharmaceutical, and financial services are probably your most highly
Mhm,
regulated. That doesn't mean the rest are not. The FCC, the FTC, and other regulators that would impact and GDPR impact Meta and the rest are no joke. But the regulation is really intense here, and it is something that you have to kind of talk with people about to say you're in a world where if you don't have a compliance program, if you don't have policies and procedures, if you don't have controls and testing and all that stuff, even if nothing went wrong, you can still be faulted for that. That's just the nature of the financial services industry. All that infrastructure to be in place. Some other industries don't necessarily have a requirement as to how a program gets built and all the trappings. They
mhm,
want you to comply. Again, depends what you're doing. If you're doing business in foreign countries, then suddenly the FCPA comes into effect and a host of other regulations. But the critical piece is fin services is highly regulated, and it's really having an open conversation to say, yes, I know this is how you might have done something before. You're not used to somebody expecting you to come to them to approve your platform changes that bring on new communications, but that's what we have to do here. We don't get
mhm.
to ask forgiveness. We actually have to build it right. It's a change.
So, Norm, maybe this might help because the vibe and the ethos we do with the podcast is to help people kind of get ideas about different careers and how to maybe pivot to a different area. Can you maybe share with the audience about what it is really to be a chief compliance officer, what happens in compliance and risk and audit because and anti-money laundering? Because I think a lot of people have no idea whatsoever. And this is like it's a you know this better than anyone. It's a huge space. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a lot of people there. They get paid fairly well. It's, I think relatively safe kind of jobs. So maybe you could kind of share for people who are kind of looking for a new job, looking to pivot, not sure what to do, to maybe give a little bit of like what this whole area is all about.
Yeah, so it's going to sound odd, but I find compliance fun
Hmm.
because at least the roles I've had, I get my hands in everything. Like you really do have to learn about everything. Compliance, people might have a view where they think compliance is just people that are, making you follow rules. That's a small piece of it, but we're actually there to help businesses grow safely. And a good compliance officer probably knows as much about how the business operates as anyone in the business, if not more, because especially when you get up into more broader roles, you have to understand how the operational pieces work, how the financial incentives work, how the reporting aspects of it work, what's the training like for your sales force or for the people building technology tools, what's the marketing strategy and how does that play into how they want to tell the story, the building out testing programs, working with audit. It's You really get a horizontal view of the business that you may not get in other roles, in other non-compliance roles or audit or risk roles, depending what they are. And you're learning something new every day. I mean, I come in the morning, I have a schedule in front of me of what meetings I'm supposed to have. I don't know what's going to come up. And it could be something I've never heard of. I mean, you mentioned cryptocurrency earlier. 10 years ago, wasn't really in the public conversation. Yes, it was around. It's been 15 years since Satoshi, et cetera, but it wasn't in the public conversation. It's something you didn't have to deal with. Cybersecurity is something compliance has their hands in now because you're expected to have policies, procedures, program testing, working with the expert. I know it's a very long answer, Jack, but I mean, compliance is an area where you got your hands in everything. It's the best way to describe it in a good way. And you got to be curious and ask a lot of questions. And where else do you get paid to ask questions and learn on a daily basis? Sometimes you do have to say no, and that can be hard, but it's the reward of seeing the company roll something out that's new and enhanced, that's meeting all the regulatory requirements, still having customers engaged and delighted and trading and the like is a lot of fun.
All right, I'm starting to think we need a different name for compliance. The way you're describing it, I think it doesn't do it justice. Is there another term too? Because it does the way you're talking about it, and I understand it. It's yeah, you have to know what's going on in fixed income, what's going on in stocks, what's going on in cryptocurrencies, what's going on with XRP, what's going on with like it's like no, never ending. You have to know so much.
It
So
yeah. I don't know, maybe it's the everything officer or the everything role.
kind of
I think,
right.
I think Amazon, they called it the everything store at one point. It is an everything role. And that look, compliance over the years, it's, these areas you never thought about. I mentioned cybersecurity. You have to get into learn about business continuity planning. Now you've got to, deep into technology generally. There's just always something new.
Mhm.
And yes, certain roles in compliance, especially early in your career, might be narrower to start, but unless that's what you want to do, it's going to get broader fast. And as you move around, you'll learn more. And I don't have a better name for it than compliance. If you've got one, Jack, I'm game.
I'm gonna think about it because seriously, if you really take a step back, right? There's so much to it. You have to have the interpersonal skills. You have to deal with people because if you don't have the interpersonal skills, and you're speaking to some trader and you just say no, you can't do that. That's it. It's just not gonna work. So you
Yeah,
have to have this kind of you know deep level of different ways of dealing, knowing how to deal with people, how to make sure, how to politely say no, you can't, but without just being a jerk. I mean,
yeah.
it's not easy, right? It's like it's a very you have to balance it, I suppose.
It's a balance is a good word. And the other thing that helps is this coffee that I keep having a sip from. You need coffee in compliance. You need coffee or some degree of caffeine.
Does all right? Does what happen if all right? You have your coffee. Does sometimes like something comes up in the news, right? And you're like, oh my god, is this going to happen to our company? Do you have those like moments of like, oh damn, like is this do I have to kind of look into it? Are we exposed? Do you have that pit in your stomach sometimes? Is that part of the job to just because it's changing so fast?
I don't know that I'd call it pit in the stomach,
Yeah.
but there's always a nagging worry in these
Mhm.
roles. That's what your job is. It is a worrying job, and yeah, certainly it's always important to know what's going on out in the world, or to anybody. And you say, yeah, is this something that could happen to us? Did
Mhm.
this happen to us? And certainly you read regulatory releases from the CFTC or the SEC or FINRA or states or whatever, and see things that they're interested in, their exam priorities, or see their notices, or see the enforcement matters or charges. And you say, are we in this line of business? If we are, do we do it the way these firms do it? And if we do, let's go dig in to see, do we have controls? Do we have procedures? Do we have everything? Do we look okay? And get prepared for it. So it quickly changes from worry to let's jump on this and be proactive if you can do that. And you have to have the time to, but that's where having great partners in your legal department, your risk department, audit if you need audit, and a great team comes into play, Jack. But yeah, it's worry is part of the job. If you don't like to worry, then you shouldn't be in compliance or audit or risk or a lawyer. And I don't know what you do if you don't worry. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a natural no matter what job you have, right? It's always a little bit, worrisome, a little nervous, a little especially when things aren't perfect, when you have like the tough times of the economy, high inflation, all that kind of stuff. It's very easy to just be like always worried about, oh no, what next? How to, not to be gauche, but what I see is that the 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 salary, the compensation for compliance, legal risk, audit, anti-money laundering, cybersecurity has really been going up. And it seems like these areas, it's a growth to me, and you know this better than I, so tell me if I'm wrong. These seems to be big growth areas that like are not really reported, in the media and that so people don't really know about it. So these are things that you could join up great firms like Robinhood and make a nice living and grow your career, but you don't really hear that too much, right? So, but it is a buoyant growing area, isn't it?
Um, Yes, but, or I'll
Mhm.
give you a yes, but as
Okay.
opposed to a yes, and. Yes, but it ultimately, the roles you just described, if you're at a firm, be it my firm or
Mhm.
pick any other firm, a bank or Morgan Stanley or Fidelity, whatever it is, it ultimately you are an expense for the firm. Like you're not bringing in revenue for the firm. If you're in any of the roles you described, you're an expense. So certainly the firm wants to make sure that its expenses are controlled appropriately, and you're going to have, obviously firms are going to have to pay to have the talent, the tools, the technology, and the support structure needed to meet the regulatory requirements and customer expectations. But what that looks like could depend on, different firms have different views on what that looks like. And ultimately, you're not going to have an open checkbook. You're not, if your goal is you want to be a gajillionaire, compliance, legal, risk,
Mhm.
audit is not where you want to be. You want to be on the business, you want to be an entrepreneur, or you want to be a salesperson, whatever dollars I mentioned. But yes, you can make a steady, nice living. We get paid appropriately for the risks that we take on.
Mhm.
If you're an AML officer, you're taking on personal risk. You mentioned before, that it might not be those you're taking. You could be personally charged, and as a chief compliance officer as well, you can be. It's rare, but it happens. So there's a piece that goes with that, Jack. And what I would add is, when you think about it, you're in a business role. It's just your business role doesn't bring in revenue. And when I'm looking at it, when I have members of my team or other teams with whom I've worked, I want them to recognize that if we say no to everything, then there's no business, and then nobody has jobs. You obviously don't want to overcorrect the other way, but you've got to show the value. That's what I'll circle back to, Jack, which is, if you're showing value for the department, for the function, if you're showing what losses you're avoiding to some extent, what attention you're avoiding, and you're doing that because you've got a talented team of people, then yes, compensation will come with that. But ultimately, that's it's got to be recognized you're still on the expense side.
Tell me, this might be a really bad analogy, but it's like an offensive lineman in football where if you save the quarterback from getting sacked, it's like, oh, of course, that's what you're supposed to do. But if the quarterback gets sacked, then you're to blame. Is that sort of what happens too? Is that it's a frustrating thing because, like you said, it's a cost center, and it's easy to say, hey, you let the quarterback get sacked. We're gonna let you go. This is terrible. Is that is it sometimes is that what you mean like by having that feeling that it's a cost center? Does that kind of weigh on people like knowing like, oh man, it's a cost center? Or is that just you know, it's not a
I
big
think
deal?
that comes just more
Yeah.
when you're looking for budget or resources or the like, and recognizing that you can't just spend all your money on oversight
Yeah.
functions like compliance, legal, risk, and audit. But your analogy's a pretty decent one, because sometimes the offensive line is protecting the quarterback.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're driving forward and they're
Mm.
trying to be proactive, which is also what compliance would rather do. Compliance would rather uh, have a running back running forward than trying to back up the quarterback. But it's, I think the point you're making really is, sometimes it's hard to show what didn't happen. That's another way I would
Mhm.
describe it, Jack. It's hard to say, look what almost happened to us. That's sometimes where looking at things that sadly happen to other firms can
Mm.
help you, because you can bring those stories in and say, remember when we talked about doing X? And we agreed we wouldn't do X this way, we would do it this other way, because we were concerned about how regulators or plaintiffs' lawyers would think about it. I think we made the right we thought we made the right choice. Here's somebody who didn't make that choice, and look what happened to them. Sometimes you do have that ability, Jack, but it can be
Mhm.
hard at times to demonstrate that value. So I don't view it more of a, I'm worried about the quarterback. I think it's just recognizing that you're part of the business and you've got to use the resources that are given to you wisely. And you don't want to bring in, you don't want to hire 50 people, when you really need 40 to do the job. That's not going to be a positive for you necessarily. And if you can, instead of adding 10 more people as the business grows, if you can invest in technology, that might be a better choice. Or you might be told, we don't have the people to build the technology
Mhm.
right now. We'd rather you bring in 10 people, and in a few years we can think about the technology. It's about recognizing that you are running a department that is a business. It just doesn't have a profit part. It's only losses.
So for people who are unaware, and I think, we talked about it a little bit before, that a lot of people aren't aware of this whole, I don't want to say niche because it's a big area now, who are not too familiar with it. What's like your day like on a day? Is it the same pretty much, or is it every day might be a fire drill, or next day not much? What, if you don't mind my asking, like on a daily basis, what kind of things do you usually focus on?
Well, I don't have a fire drill every day.
Mm.
That's very fortunate to not have that. Fire drill by definition should not be very frequent, to use that word. But it's a series of one-on-one meetings
Mhm.
with my team members. I do a good deal of skip level meetings. I meet with business partners on a regular basis, leaders of different businesses. I might I go to governance committee meetings, that might be compliance ones or audit ones or risk ones or product review meetings, risk meetings, a variety of those type meetings. There's management meetings to go to, and there's project type work where you're jumping in to say we're looking at launching X. We'd like to
Mhm.
pick your brain or find the right team members to talk to us about what we should think about when we launch X. There's other days I do a lot of external work as well. You're talking to if you're in compliance, you should be talking to your regulators as you gain the experience and trust that your firm says you should. So you're talking to regulators on a proactive basis. Sometimes it's committees, sometimes it's asking them questions, and the like. Um, I'm participate in multiple industry groups, SIFMA, FSDA out of Florida, the National Society of Compliance Professionals, any different groups that you connecting with other people in the industry, and that's part of my day as well. Like you do, it's hands in everything,
Mhm.
Jack. And certainly, do things come up? Sure. If there's if the market shuts down, yeah, that's going to change my day potentially. If some story hits the press that might be negative about the industry generally, or about us, or that might change the nature of the day as well, or some unexpected thing happens to, that it may or may not be a fire drill, Jack, but I think, I generally describe what I do, but sometimes that whole thing goes out the window and you might be told, hey, all hands on deck. This thing is going to be is happening right now. So that's the way to think about that. It's again, if you want predictability in your daily job, there are compliance roles that have that, but sometimes that goes out the window and you're pulling four people in to say, let's go do this.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned, speaking of compliance roles, to help, people in the audience who, you know, maybe they're already in compliance, or maybe they're just looking for another job but don't know where to go. Can you maybe share what is some interesting, compelling, you know, maybe well-paying jobs within compliance, legal risk, audit in those areas?
Well, I can't comment on what well paying is. That's in the eye of the beholder, Jack. But
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, many would say legal partners do quite
Mhm,
well for themselves at law firms, but there's a trade-off. They may not have
mhm.
much of a life because they're talking to clients at 2 in the morning on Saturday during Christmas vacation, potentially. Um, but there's a variety of different roles. I mean, you can be in-house. In-house used to be viewed as for legal or compliances, it's a 9 to 5 punch the clock role. That was 25 years ago. That's not true anymore. You're working a lot of hours in any of these roles. They're not for punch the clock type people for these roles, but you Specialties can certainly be rewarding for people. If you become the world's number one expert on a widget sales in compliance or legal, then you're certainly going to be getting rewarded for that and heavily in demand. But by the same token, if you're somebody who's known, who can do anything, you have a mind where you're able to analyze any product or any sales process and the like, and recognize quickly what the holes are in that, what controls are needed, what policies are needed, and figure out the product, whatever the offering is later. You're an all-around athlete. That's also going to be something where you're pretty much in demand, and you can move around as appropriate or take on new roles. It's sort of going in both those directions, Jack. Certainly, CC, the higher you move up in any infrastructure, be it risk or compliance or audit or legal, certainly you're going to expect that compensation comes with that. But again, if you're doing it for the money, you're probably going to want to be starting up your own business. If you look at all the numbers and you talk to a number of people on your podcast here, Jack,
Mhm.
entrepreneurs are the ones that get the greatest rewards because they take the greatest risks.
That does make sense. It's like if you know you have whether it's compliance or any other job, if you're just based on a salary, there's only so much you could do. But
Right.
if you have, it was crazy you bring it up. I interview so many of these like tech people, and the amount of money they make is insane. It's crazy, and the stuff that they could do though is blows my mind. You must see it where you are, where like they could create something out of nothing. And to me, who I'm not like, I'm real, I like tech, but it's just mind blowing how like these people could just all of a sudden create these wonderful things and make fortunes. But I get what you're saying. If you have that job, even if you paid pretty well, it's hard to really make a crazy amount of money.
Yeah. Well, look, the auto industry was created from nothing. You know
Yeah.
that manufacturing used to be that path as well. And I don't mean to dissuade people from thinking that you can make a decent living, but life isn't always just about money. Sometimes it's are you getting enjoyment and satisfaction from what you're
Mm.
doing? Do you feel engaged? Do you feel that there's value? Are your values, ethics, and the like aligned with what you're doing? And I feel I'm helping people when I do this, and I know that sounds kind of hokey, Jack, but yes, we all have bills to pay. We all have aspirations for where we want to go and what we want to own, and what we want to do and leave legacies. But ultimately, I'm helping a lot of people, is my belief, myself, my team, all of us collectively, because we're giving people a positive experience where they themselves can invest. And using investing, that's how you build generational wealth as well, by investing.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring it up because I remember back about 9/11, where so many anti-money laundering compliance people would say that they were really super engaged in their job because they felt, hey, I'm doing my part to help make sure that we don't see another terrorist, attack or something of that nature. And they really meant it and really felt like not only was it their job, it was like a calling, so it isn't hokey, that this is something that people take really seriously to help out. And
Yeah.
and you're right. And there's different ways you could kind of enjoy your career. It's not just money. It could be like, hey, I'm doing something good. I'm helping out people. I'm making things better,
Yeah.
which
I,
you
I
have to
mean, look,
factor
you
in.
mentioned AML, Jack, as an
Yeah.
example. So, and what's changed? 25 years ago, it was about 9/11 and terrorists. Now, in financial crimes, as it's called, the expectations are that you're also looking to identify human trafficking
Mm,
as an example. So think about that. Like, terrorism, one thing, but now if you're in these AML type roles, you might be identifying rings of human traffickers, and you're passing that information on to law enforcement who might be able to shut down those kind of efforts, because without financing they can't happen. So it's gotten, obviously there's drug money and money laundering and the like, but when you get into these other areas, you are doing something that can be a little more than your day-to-day mundane job. And look, we have one of our values at Robinhood here is safety first. because we believe this stuff is important, and that resonates with me. And when you're in your individual roles, you say, what am I contributing? You could, for some people, you could say, I prevented somebody from being
Mhm.
trafficked across the border for, nefarious purposes.
I've been hearing lately, and especially seeing on social media about trafficking, but evidently I guess this is huge, huh?
Well,
I wasn't aware.
it's obvious. It's been a
Yeah,
worldwide issue for a
yeah,
while, and I made a hyper focus on that one. But
yeah,
it's another example beyond terrorism, beyond
yeah.
general money laundering, beyond what you've read about in recycling drug money and the like. There's arms trafficking is out there. So it's just these roles have an opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah, the more you talk about it, I guess there's more need for these people to deal with it, right? This is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to watch out for so much stuff. Let me ask you this before we kind of trail off. And do you have any sense like what you want to do next within Robinhood? Is there kind of a trajectory you're looking for, or everything, you're like, hey, I loved being the CCO, or you want to maybe be a COO, or what have you? You have any thoughts about your career kind of moving forward?
Right now, I've got plenty of challenges on my plate here. I
Mhm.
mean, we just announced and launched a futures business here. We have expanded internationally. Announced launching in Singapore to do business there. We're in Europe doing cryptocurrency. We've got a brokerage business in the UK. We've got teams of people working on all these things, and I have challenges every day, Jack. So I'm not lacking for things to do. And certainly, if somebody here said to me, "Hey, we'd like you to be," you mentioned COO, whatever it is, some other role, I'm open for the challenge. But I'm here to help, and I'm at a point in my career where I'm not worried about what's next per se. I'm more worried about what can I do to help us grow and help us, bring investing, democratize finance for all is our mantra here. But I think everybody's trying to do that now, and I think it's a great spot to be in. So I'm not worried about what I'm doing next. I focus more, to be honest with you, Jack, on
Mhm.
what's next for some of my team members, what's next for
Mm.
the people around Robinhood and developing them, and even outside the firm, like what are other compliance people doing? How do we get compliance folks to have better skills, prepare them for the next role, whatever that is? Because the way we've just talked about it, maybe some people got excited about, maybe some people said, wow, that's a lot to worry about. I don't want to do that. So we got to strike a balance there.
This is great. See, and I'm so glad we had this conversation because this is an area that, not to be redundant, because we talked about that people aren't that aware of, but it's so multi-leveled, so textured. There's so much involved with it that it is interesting. And it's like maybe kind of the worst kept secret that these jobs are important and you're helping people and you're making a difference. So I'm really glad we were able to have this conversation and share with people, and particularly hopefully for the audience who are thinking of like, hey, I don't know what to do with my life, with my career, may say, hey, you know what? These are some interesting jobs. Let me check it out. Let me go into this space. So this is what we're trying to achieve and help people out with people like yourself giving advice and guidance and shedding light on what it's like to be in this type of career. And maybe this could kind of help a lot of people who are feeling a little lost to get some direction. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate the time.
Yeah, and Jack, if I could add sort of two more thoughts on that, if you don't
Of
mind.
course,
So
yeah.
one of them is, you don't have to be in compliance for your entire career.
Hmm.
People Sometimes people say, how do you get into compliance? Some people have, years ago it used to be audit or operations backgrounds, but people come from sales roles because you know how it's done
Hmm.
right or not done right. People come from legal roles and audit roles and risk roles. People can come from product roles. Technology people are being hired increasingly into compliance, and sometimes people join, do compliance for 3, 4, 5 years, and then go back out into a new role out in your business or out in your technology space. And now you've got somebody who's out there in the world who actually knows the compliance side intimately and is in the business side almost like an embed. You know these things. So that's kind of one thought is you can go in and out. And the second thing is whatever you think you're doing tomorrow, may not be what you're doing in 10 years. I mean, artificial intelligence, we didn't even get too much, but that's something in compliance you need to learn a lot about. 5 years ago, you weren't thinking about that. 25 years ago,
Mm,
people were looking at tractor paper reports being spit out of machines and handwriting and initialing exception reports in compliance. And now you've got these surveillance dashboards running through machine learning, and you're only looking at true exceptions that you're diving down on, and you're doing it all online in a closed loop system. The roles have changed, the jobs have changed, it will change tomorrow. So,
mhm.
whatever it is, don't think, well, I don't know anything about compliance, I can't do it. And don't think I'm going to go to compliance and I'm stuck there. Those are two things I'd have people think about, Jack.
Well, this is great. I really love your insights and your passion for what you do, and sharing with the audience, great ideas of how they could kind of boost their career. So, thanks so much, Norm.
Appreciate it, Jack. Thank you.